Mr. President, Excellencies and colleagues, on June 22nd, 1985, exactly 38 years ago today, a plane took off from Vancouver, Canada, to Toronto with a bomb that was built in Canada by violent extremists in my country. The luggage in which that bomb was hidden made its way onto a plane that took off from Toronto, my hometown, on Air India Flight 182, which then picked up more passengers in Montreal and took off for London, England, after which it was intended to fly to Delhi in India. Given the time of the year, just like today, students were finishing school, and many Canadians with family ties to India were going to see loved ones. Shortly after midnight on June 23rd, that bomb, which had gone undetected, went off, and all 329 people on board that plane perished, with the bodies being identified by Canadian families who descended on Cork, Ireland, supported by an incredible Irish population who rallied to house them. That same day, 2 baggage handlers in Narita, Japan, were killed by a bomb that also originated on a separate flight from Vancouver. That fateful day, June 23rd, which Canadians will commemorate tomorrow, remained the deadliest act of aviation terrorism until the events of 9/11 and its devastating impact on this city of New York. Indeed, after 9/11, my government asked me to examine the incident and the lessons learned from it for our then counter-terrorism posture. I'm not going to go into the details of that report, which you can still find online under the title Lessons to be Learned. But I mention all this because when the President of the General Assembly asked me and my dear colleague, Ambassador Ladeb of Tunisia, to co-facilitate the 8th review of the Global Counterterrorism Strategy, I was motivated by the victims aboard that flight and so many others that have shared their stories with me, and to make a further contribution to the fight against this global scourge. I say these words without any sense of defensiveness as follows. Ambassador Ladeb and I are not the co-authors of the text. That's not what the co-facilitation process is all about. It's about member states agreeing with other member states who have different points of view. What we can do, and what I hope we were successful in doing, is shaping the process and helping to identify the consensus that actually exists among member states. We tried to engage directly and transparently with all the parties who sought to be actively included in the process. We built on past practice and sought to further consultations with civil society, briefings from numerous UN counter-terrorism compact entities in the process, and will seek to ensure that the practice is preserved in the development of future roadmaps. Let me, as one of the co-facilitators, and I know I'll be followed by my good friend Ambassador Ladeb as well, just to thank several people and several groups. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mr. President, for giving us this honor, although I must confess that that was not necessarily my feeling on every single day in the last little while. But I also want to express my thanks to Undersecretary Voronkov, his team, the UNOCT, to the CTED for the assessments and analysis that have kept us all current, for UNODC for its strong field presence and experience, briefing member states on new programs, on OHCHR and the Special Rapporteur for reminding us to be aware of the human rights impact of all of our counterterrorism efforts and the universality of our obligations. Of course, I want to thank my friend and colleague, Ambassador Tariq Ladeb. We've become good buddies in the last little while, and it's been good to working with him and his team. And to my assistant, Hussein Herji, who's been thanked by others. I think we all know that the process of facilitation is carried out by what we call experts who've just spent countless hours working together to help us get to this finish line. I want to say a word about the strategy overall, and that is that, in my view, we actually made some progress in the 8th Review. Listening to the speeches this morning, it's clear that we did not make all the progress that some countries and delegates and groups would have liked. And that is a reality. It's in the nature of the process. We don't carry out these discussions in a perfect world. We don't carry it out without the geopolitics of our time taking place. We carry it out in a way that is never going to be perfect, but we try to advance a little bit by bit, where we think the consensus can go and how to strengthen it. I think it's fair to say that a few things have changed over the last several years in the landscape. The first one is, I think, and perhaps my narrative about going from events in India to events in Canada, to events, tragic events in Ireland, to appreciate that this is truly, the nature of the beast is that it is global. People move, people travel. The idea that terrorism and its threat is somehow confined to only one part of the world or to a particular set of issues is not true. It's a truly global phenomenon. And while it comes out of conflict zones, those conflict zones have impacts all over the world, simply because of the nature of globalization. Terrorists used to target planes to hijack or blow up. Now they seek drones. They use drones. So it depends on technologies. That's one. The internet, obviously, is another. The speed with which communication takes place, the way in which it takes hold of the individual citizen, of the individual young person, means that an event that happens in one part of the world can have a direct impact on another part of the world because of the person who's getting the misinformation or disinformation or hate speech online. And that's where the process of radicalization is taking place. The recruitment is not confined to a geographic area. The recruitment takes place online. Right now, as we speak, there are young people sitting in front of a screen who are watching hateful propaganda and who are being persuaded by it and attracted by it. They could live in New York or Delhi or Toronto or Buenos Aires or anywhere. So as we went through the past review, the 7th review, the initial reaction from people was to say, let's try to do a technical rollover. We made progress in the 7th review, let's build on that. But as we did that, each delegate would come to us and say, we want to do a technical rollover, but there's just one new thing I'd like you to add that reflects our point of view. So we listened to that, obviously, as co-facilitators, but we also said, look, it's not us you have to persuade. Because for every addition that you want to make, someone else will want to make another one. And this is, I know I've heard the frustration from colleagues from the podium, and I understand the frustration. But the reality is this is the process we have created of consensus. And I think the advantage of consensus is that it allows us to speak on behalf of all the citizens of the world and say that at a very minimum, this is where we need to go. And I think that's something we would lose if we simply went by paragraph, word by word, vote by vote, and started dividing up even more than we are already divided. But I have to say that some of the things that were suggested, speaking personally and speaking as in my national capacity, I think have tremendous merit. I think we do have to deal with new forms of hatred. I think we do have to deal with Islamophobia. But we should find it in our hearts to deal with anti-Semitism and any other form of racial hatred that desecrates religions and that leads to violence. We have to understand the legitimate concerns about free speech, but we also have to understand that incitement, direct incitement, remains a criminal act. So we were able to do some things. We reflected important meetings that have been held in Spain, in India, in Tajikistan, as well as the Victims' Congress in New York. And although there was no consensus on the outcome documents for those meetings, including, regrettably, the Delhi Declaration, there was a recognition that these discussions are taking place on an ongoing basis. We discussed the importance of further engaging civil society, particularly around counterterrorism, with many emphasizing the importance of protection. And while we could not agree on specific, stronger language, which I find regrettable, there is a new reference to the importance of supporting women-led civil society. We discussed the question of oversight of the growing UN architecture on counterterrorism. The philosophy we've adopted in Canada is to say that measures against terrorism and the threat of terrorism have to be robust, but the oversight to ensure that civil liberties are protected also has to be robust. And that's where I think we need to strike the balance here at the UN. And I certainly, for one, hope that over the next 3 years, we'll be able to take away some of the fears and concerns that we heard expressed about what that would mean or how it would impact the work of the agencies. I think we've seen leadership from the Secretary General in his report on the growth of racist, sexist extremism, and I think his reports are a first step in understanding this threat, and we agreed that more research and data are going to be required. And to achieve this, we have made an important agreement that the next cycle will take 3 years, and as my colleague from Saudi Arabia pointed out, it will now take place at the 20th anniversary of the whole strategy. This is a learning exercise for all of us. It's a learning exercise for the globe. We made a dramatic step after 9/11 to recognize that this global terrorism is something which can have an impact on every country around the world, and that we need to create a global strategy to deal with a global phenomenon. Le terrorisme et les risques du terrorisme ne sont pas limités à un pays, une zone de conflit, une région. Ils ne sont pas limités par l'ethnicité. Ils ne sont pas déterminés par une religion ou une autre. Ça n'a rien à faire avec la situation. La réalité de notre situation dans le monde aujourd'hui, c'est que le terrorisme est une menace à tout le monde. C'est une menace pour tous les citoyens du monde. Et c'est une menace qui peut avoir des impacts terribles pour les populations dans le monde. Et c'est pourquoi je crois que notre travail est absolument essentiel. I referred, Mr. President, in my opening comments to the Air India bombing of 1985. Just before I completed that report, I had a visit from a man who I did not know, and he came with a package for me, and I opened it in front of him. And he told me that he was related to a little girl who was on the plane. And he showed me her picture. Her name was Kiranjit Ray. And he said, I want you to know that what you're doing is not about numbers. It's not about people that you don't know. So let me tell you about her. And he did. And then he showed me something that I thought was really, really shook me. He showed me the letters that the children in her class at a public school in Toronto had sent to her family. And he gave me the picture, And he said, I want you to keep this picture and put it on your desk. It came in a little frame. If you come to my residence, you will see that picture. It's on my desk. Finally, I would ask all of you as we go forward to think about a couple of things. The first one is the enduring value of empathy. We should find it in our hearts to speak not only about the hatred against ourselves, our own group. We should find it in our hearts to speak more about the hatred that exists for others as well. That's what empathy means. It means the ability to really understand what other people are going through. And we should find it in our hearts to do that. And in order to do that, we not only have to demonstrate that capacity for empathy and understanding, we also have to really listen to what other people are saying about what we have just said. That's what this process is about. That's what this assembly at its best is about. It's about empathy, and it's about listening. And finally, it's about action. We took action to create UNOCT, the Office of Counter-Terrorism. We took action to try to demonstrate that we were capable as a global community to coordinate all of our national efforts to deal with the impact of terrorism on our world. We've now created an architecture with the 4 pillars that have been so aptly described. And now we have to keep on building. But let us never forget, and let us keep in our mind's eye and in our hearts the realities of all those who have been killed, all those who are at risk, and all those whose security is still not sufficiently protected because our efforts have been imperfect. Can we do it better next time? I hope so. We must keep trying. I thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Canada